Once upon a time, in a kingdom resting quietly between silver rivers and endless forests, there lived a story that moved as gently as falling snow. It was a world where seasons changed slowly, where people believed that the heart of a person mattered more than their appearance, and where magic existed not only in mirrors and spells, but in everyday kindness. This is the story of Snow White, not just a tale of beauty, but of patience, trust, and quiet courage. Before we begin, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to support more calm and meaningful storytelling. Now, allow yourself to relax, breathe deeply, and let this long and peaceful fairy tale carry you into its world. Snow White's earliest memories were not shaped by grand halls or royal ceremonies, but by the quiet presence of her mother. In those first years of her life, the world felt small, gentle, and safe. Mornings often began with soft light spilling across the stone floors, and Snow White would wake to the sound of her mother's calm breathing nearby, steady and reassuring like a quiet melody. Her mother held her often, not out of duty, but out of love that asked for nothing in return. When Snow White cried, the queen did not rush or grow anxious. She would sit by the cradle, humming low, patient songs that seemed to slow time itself. Gradually, Snow White learned that the world responded to gentleness, and that calm could be shared from one heart to another. As Snow White grew strong enough to walk, her mother introduced her to the palace gardens. They moved slowly along stone paths lined with flowers and tall trees, stopping often so Snow White could touch leaves or watch insects resting on petals. The queen never hurried these moments. She believed that a child learned more from quiet observation than from constant instruction. Snow White learned to listen, to notice, and to feel at peace in silence. During long afternoons, the queen would sit by the window with Snow White resting against her side. Sometimes she spoke softly about the world beyond the palace walls, about rivers that traveled far without knowing their destination, and stars that shone without asking to be seen. Other times, they simply watched the sky together, sharing a silence that felt full rather than empty. At night, when the palace grew still, Snow White's mother would tuck her into bed with careful hands. She told stories not of fear or conflict, but of kindness passed quietly from one person to another. In these stories, no one needed to be loud to be strong, and no one needed to be admired to matter. Snow White drifted to sleep each night wrapped in both blankets and wisdom. Even in moments when the queen felt her own strength fading, she never allowed sadness to overshadow these early days. She smiled often, as if storing warmth for Snow White to find later in life. And though Snow White was too young to understand loss, she absorbed something deeper, the feeling of being truly seen and deeply loved. These early days ended sooner than anyone wished, but they left an imprint that never faded. Long after her mother was gone, Snow White carried those quiet mornings, gentle songs, and peaceful silences within her. They became her inner compass, guiding her through loneliness, uncertainty, and change. In every calm choice she made, in every act of kindness she offered, the love of her mother continued to live, softly and endlessly. Snow White's childhood unfolded quietly within the tall stone walls of the palace, where mornings began with soft light filtering through long curtains and evenings ended with gentle songs echoing down empty corridors. From a very young age, she showed a rare sensitivity to the world around her. While other children might run loudly through the halls, Snow White preferred to sit by the windows, watching clouds drift slowly across the sky or listening to the wind as it passed through the gardens below. Her mother, the Queen, noticed this calm nature and nurtured it with patience. She taught Snow White to see beauty not only in appearance, but in behavior, reminding her that words could heal just as easily as they could hurt. Often, they would walk together through the palace gardens, where the Queen explained the names of flowers and the quiet importance of caring for even the smallest living things. Snow White learned early that kindness was not a grand gesture, but a daily choice. When Snow White was still very young, winter evenings became a time of closeness. The Queen would wrap her daughter in warm blankets and tell her stories of distant lands, brave souls, and gentle hearts. These stories were never filled with fear or cruelty. Instead, they focused on patience, forgiveness, and the belief that goodness had a way of returning to those who offered it freely. Snow White listened closely, carrying these lessons deep within her. As she grew older, Snow White spent time with the palace servants, helping them with simple tasks. She learned how bread was baked, how candles were made, and how the palace stayed alive through the quiet work of many hands. Rather than seeing these people as separate from herself, she felt connected to them, understanding that every role mattered. This sense of equality shaped her view of the world more than any royal lesson ever could. After her mother's passing, Snow White's childhood changed, though her gentle spirit remained. She felt the absence deeply, especially during moments of celebration, when joy seemed incomplete. Yet she honored her mother's memory by continuing to act with kindness and humility. In moments of sadness, she returned to the gardens, believing that nature still carried her mother's voice in its silence. Her father, the king, loved her dearly but was often burdened by the responsibilities of ruling. Snow White learned independence early, spending hours reading, reflecting, and observing the world around her. She grew comfortable with solitude, not as loneliness, but as a space for understanding herself. When the new queen arrived, Snow White was old enough to sense the change in atmosphere. The palace felt different, less warm, more carefully controlled. Snow White remained polite and respectful, never imagining that her presence might cause harm. Her innocence prevented her from seeing jealousy where it quietly formed. This childhood, shaped by love, loss, and reflection, prepared Snow White for everything that would follow. It taught her resilience without hardness, and trust without naivety. Long before she ever stepped into the forest, Snow White had already learned the most important lesson of all, that gentleness, when guided by wisdom, could be a quiet form of strength. Snow White was born on a winter night when the moonlight reflected softly on untouched snow. From her earliest days, there was something gentle in her presence. Something that made even the coldest rooms feel warmer. Her mother, the Queen, often held her close by the window, watching the snow fall in silence, believing that her daughter was a gift shaped by both love and hope. As years passed, Snow White grew into a child with a calm voice and thoughtful eyes. She listened more than she spoke, and when she smiled, it felt sincere. The people of the palace noticed this quiet kindness, and many believed it was the reason the halls felt brighter when she walked through them. When the Queen passed away, a deep stillness settled over the kingdom. Snow White felt the loss deeply, yet she carried her grief with grace. The king did everything he could to protect his daughter, but the responsibilities of the crown slowly pulled him away. In time, he remarried, bringing a new queen into the palace. The new queen was elegant and intelligent, admired for her beauty and confidence. Yet beneath her composed exterior lived a restless desire for admiration. In her private chamber stood a magical mirror, an object that reflected not only appearance, but truth itself. Each morning, she stood before it, asking who was the fairest in the land, finding comfort in hearing her own name. For many years, the mirror answered as she wished. But time, patient and unstoppable, brought change. Snow White matured into a young woman whose beauty was softened by humility and warmth. She helped servants without being asked, spoke kindly to strangers, and treated everyone as equal. Slowly, without intention, she captured the admiration of the entire kingdom. The day the mirror spoke Snow White's name, the queen felt something shift inside her. It was not anger at first, but fear of losing control, fear of being forgotten. That fear quietly transformed into jealousy, growing stronger with each passing day. Instead of confronting her feelings, the queen allowed them to guide her actions. Determined to remove Snow White from her life, the queen ordered a huntsman to take the girl into the forest. The forest was deep, ancient, and unknown. Yet when the huntsman looked at Snow White, he saw only innocence and trust. Unable to carry out his task, he warned her and urged her to flee. Alone in the forest, Snow White felt fear, but she continued forward. The trees seemed to watch over her, and the path led her to a small cottage hidden among the roots of old trees. Inside, everything was small and simple, yet warm and welcoming. Exhausted, she rested there, unaware that this place would become her refuge. The 7 dwarfs returned that evening, surprised but not angered by the unexpected guest. Snow White spoke honestly, and her sincerity touched them deeply. They offered her safety, and in return, she brought warmth into their home. Days passed peacefully, marked by shared meals, gentle songs, and quiet routines. Snow White learned that happiness could exist without luxury. She found joy in simple work, laughter, and friendship. The forest became her home, and the dwarfs her family. Yet far away, the queen remained restless. When the mirror revealed that Snow White still lived, the queen disguised herself and traveled to the forest. Her words were gentle, her smile convincing. Snow White, trusting by nature, listened. When she tasted the apple, the world grew quiet, and she fell into a deep sleep. The forest mourned in silence. The dwarfs watched over her, refusing to let her go. They placed her in a glass coffin, believing that even if she slept, her light should not be hidden. Time passed slowly, until one day, a prince wandered into the forest. Drawn by a feeling he could not explain, he discovered Snow White and felt a deep respect rather than possession. In that moment, fate gently intervened, allowing Snow White to awaken. Snow White's return was soft, like dawn after a long night. She carried with her a deeper understanding of the world and her place in it. When she returned to the kingdom, she chose compassion over judgment and kindness over pride. The queen's power faded, as all power built on jealousy eventually does. Snow White ruled with patience, listening to her people and leading by example. The kingdom flourished, not through fear, but through trust. The dwarfs remained honored friends, symbols of loyalty and simplicity. And so, this long and gentle fairy tale reminds us that true strength is quiet, and true beauty lives in the heart. Thank you for listening, and may your thoughts be calm, your dreams peaceful, and your night restful. Sleep well, and good night.